Welcome, I'm Nina Griffin, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today, we'll talk about Mars's journey through Gemini in 2022 and 2023. It's going to be a long transit with lots of interesting astrology along the way. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. I appreciate all of your support and all of your encouragement as I make this content about astrology, magic, astrological magic, and more. If you would like to become a patron, please visit patreon.com/Nina Griffin to get access to all of this content early, in some cases exclusively, and at the highest tier you can get access to my monthly Magical Elections document, which will give you the best times and also the instructions for making planetary and other celestial talismans every month. Mars usually spends, on average, 2 months in every sign, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more, depending on how fast Mars is moving. This year and early next year, Mars is going to spend 7 months in one sign, and that one sign is Gemini. So first, let's talk about key numbers of his journey. So Mars will enter Gemini August 20th. He will then go direct until he stations retrograde October 30th at 25 degrees Gemini. He will be retrograde for 74 days. Then Mars will turn direct January 12th, 2023 at 8 degrees Gemini. And then Mars will leave Gemini March 25th, 2023. So in total, we're going to get Mars in Gemini for 217 days, or if you're counting 7 months and 5 days. That's a lot of Mars in Gemini. First, let's talk about some of the events that have occurred in recent years when Mars passed through Gemini and was retrograde at that time. The most recent time was August 6th, 2007 through September 28th, 2007. Mars transited Gemini the first time. Then Mars passed into the next sign, Cancer, and went back into Gemini starting December 31st, 2007, stationed direct at 24 Gemini, until moving into Cancer March 4th, 2008. This transit was linked to the stock market crash, which started October 9th, 2007, but in many ways, it seemed to have actually been forestalled until March 17th, shortly after Mars moved into Cancer. So we can think of it like this. Mars in Gemini the first time triggered the financial crash, but then created all this doubt and questions about whether the underlying problems were real. It's kind of like as Mars went retrograde in Gemini, people sort of went back and thought about, is this panic really warranted? Is it real? So there was a lot of second guessing. Until Mars completed his retrograde and moved into Cancer, people were not really sure that this was real. It's also important to note that as Mars was retrograding through Gemini, he opposed the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter-Pluto is often closely linked with great wealth, with financiers, with banking, all of those key institutions that were so instrumental in the financial crash of the late 2000s. Mars opposed this multiple times, sort of cleaning out a lot of the excesses of that time and bringing them to the surface. It took a lot longer than that to actually address this. However, Mars created a situation of crisis by creating this opposition multiple times, and as a result, the stock market crashed, the housing market crashed, the lending market between banks also crashed. Prior to that, Mars was in Gemini from August 1990 through April 1991, aligning quite closely with the Gulf War. Now, Mars's retrograde period from August to October of 1990 aligned with the period of escalation and lead up to the actual invasion. During this period, the world imposed sanctions on Iraq and attempted to reach a diplomatic solution. Obviously, this did not go anywhere. However, you can see how that retrograde period, once again, is sort of people taking stock and maybe second-guessing their approach. Are we right? Is there still a way to salvage the situation before taking the momentous step of an invasion? So Mars in Gemini retrograde certainly seems to have a role in slowing down events that seem almost inevitable. It can be a period of second-guessing. It can be a period of trying to forestall what later seemed like the inevitable. The theme of Mars retrograde is slow down, cowboy, although in both examples with the Gulf War as well as the 2008 financial crash, the retrograde period ended up just being a temporary pause, a speed bump on the way to the inevitable conclusion. Now you will notice that both of these examples, even though they had international repercussions, are fairly US-centric. You may know that the US historically strongly responds to slow transits through Gemini, And I personally consider Gemini to be the sign of the United States, partly for this reason. You may also know that the July 4th, 1776 chart, regardless of the time you use, for the United States, has Mars at 21 degrees Gemini and Uranus at 8 degrees Gemini. Note that this upcoming year, we're going to have Mars stationing retrograde near the US natal Mars at 25 Gemini on October 30th, and then Mars will station direct on the US Uranus at 8 Gemini on January 12th. So in fact, both of the US planets in Gemini are going to be activated quite strongly due to Mars's stations happening either on them or very close to them. So the impact of this transit will likely be highly noticeable in the United States, in the country as a whole. Now, the impact could be financial, as we saw in 2008, but I think that it's more likely to indicate conflict in which the US is involved domestically and/or internationally. After all, this transit could symbolize several events happening at the same time. Now, it's important to recognize that Mars will turn retrograde about 10 days before the US midterm elections. I think that important election results will likely be contested, possibly with violence and drama, since of course Mars is involved. However, instead of being afraid, recognize that after passing through Gemini, Mars will enter Cancer, the sign of his fall. So this long operatic Mars in Gemini period is actually more like a prolonged denial of the inevitable loss of power for Mars. There's sort of a lot of kicking and screaming before the stage hook takes them away. Now, in terms of world events, Mars in Gemini will also make an impact. Globally, I am sure that this transit will definitely reflect Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the resulting energy shocks as a result. It's important to note that the transit starts in late summer and continues into spring 2023, a time when Europe will need gas and oil to keep running, and Russia will likely withhold its supplies of oil and gas. This is likely going to be a nasty conflict over resources, most likely not resolved in any way until the upcoming spring, when Mars will enter Cancer. It's also important to recognize that Mars in Gemini will impact a number of public figures. Certainly any public figures with strong Gemini and Sagittarius placements will be impacted, probably negatively since this is Mars. It's a malefic planet symbolizing conflict and separation. It's interesting to note that a number of the politicians and other individuals who rode to power on the populist wave of Saturn and Sagittarius back in 2016 will be strongly impacted, as a number of them have major Gemini and/or Sagittarius natal horoscope placements. It's a long list of people that really reads like a who's who of top figures in Brexit in the UK and the MAGA movement in the United States. A lot of these folks will likely be impacted, all in the same ways in their respective countries and respective political systems. The big picture is that Mars in Gemini will bring a significant revisiting of the changes that these countries have been through since 2016, again accompanied with drama and conflict and potentially even violence. This is a movement, and these are movements, I should say, that will not go silently into that good night. And the 7-month Mars in Gemini period will be a big part of the story of a lot of this movement departing and potentially needing dramatic change in order to stay relevant as Mars moves into Cancer. Nonetheless, because Mars moves into Cancer at the end of this dramatic, protracted transit, there is a sense of a loss of power, of a loss of visibility. Now, all of this also applies to organizations that have strong Gemini and Sagittarius placements. One example is Twitter. You may know that the billionaire Elon Musk signed an agreement to buy Twitter, and now he wants to back out, supposedly due to undisclosed problems with the service. Unfortunately for him, the agreement he signed requires him to pay a $1 billion walkaway fee, and Twitter is currently taking him to court for breach of contract. The trial is supposed to start in, you guessed it, October, just as Mars approaches its first station. Elon Musk has Venus and Saturn in Gemini, so he's going to be impacted by this Mars retrograde. And he also has a Saturn-Neptune opposition between Gemini and Sagittarius. So he is certainly one of the people who's going to be strongly impacted by Mars's travel through Gemini. Twitter as an organization has Mars in Gemini, natally, opposed by Moon in Sagittarius. So we can be sure that the impending litigation about the acquisition will be protracted and dramatic, likely until Mars leaves Gemini in 2023. Even though the trial will happen in October, there likely will not be a resolution anytime soon. Let's also talk about the key aspects that Mars in Gemini will make as it travels these 7 months. The major aspects that it makes to superior and outer planets will help tell the story of what Mars will do. So in 2007-2008, Mars opposed the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, which is a strongly financially symbolic combination, setting off the stock market crash and financial crisis. This year and early next year, we will see Mars trine Saturn in Aquarius, and the exact dates are September 27th, November 28th, and March 30th. Now, Mars' journey may be in the service of the status quo in many ways, in terms of preserving institutions and the entrenched powers. Interestingly, Saturn also represents the ordinary working people, and so Mars trine Saturn suggests an attempt to shore up the strength of this very large group. In addition, Mars will square Neptune in Pisces 3 times, and that will be October 11th, November 19th, and March 14th. There will certainly be debates and conflicts around mass deception, which is the curse of Neptune, and certainly conflicts pertaining to gas, especially natural gas, and accompanying energy price spikes and inflation. This is again that tie back to the Russia-Ukraine war. Certainly, we're going to see a tough period for the Western countries that depend on Russian gas and oil. It's going to be hard for them, I think, to hold together against this very difficult economic period. The unity that was previously indicated by Jupiter conjunct Neptune in Pisces, that idealism, that goodwill, will be challenged this fall and winter as Mars makes his square to Neptune. So to summarize, this upcoming Mars in Gemini will last 7 months, of which Mars will be retrograde 74 days. It will noticeably impact the United States, which has important Gemini placements, and the impact will likely be a long and protracted conflict involving U.S. politics, centering on this year's midterm elections in late 2022. We will also see a major impact on the European gas supply and the accompanying gas and energy price spikes. The period will be a referendum on the national and international populist movements and their key players who came to power around 2016 with Saturn in Sagittarius. This includes companies like Twitter and politics-adjacent individuals like Elon Musk. Ultimately, though, Mars will not be able to stop the inevitable, and significant changes are coming in 2023 when Mars leaves Gemini and enters Cancer, the sign of its fall.